My people, I'm going to let you in on a little secret about Los Angeles. Yes, the land of Hollywood dreams, palm trees, and billion-dollar real estates. The city that is now in turmoil as Trump cracks down on illegal migrants. Did you know that that city was founded by Mexicans of African descent? Yes, Black people, Afro-Mexicans, were among the original settlers who built what we now call Los Angeles. Not the version you see in movies, not the version you read in textbooks. This story didn't start with Hollywood. It started with 44 settlers, Los Pobladores, who walked across the desert in 1781 to found a new Spanish settlement in Alta California. And more than half of them were Black or had African ancestry. But you don't hear that part because America has done what it always does and what it's doing even now. Erase Black history that doesn't fit the narrative, especially when it crosses borders. So today on The Breakdown, we're digging up the truth about Los Angeles. Its Afro-Mexican roots, the Black families who laid its foundations, and how this one story flips everything you thought you knew about California, race, and the making of the West. And make no mistake, this isn't just about history. It's about the present. It's about what's happening right now in Washington and what's happening right now in the streets of LA. Because when you erase Black people from history, you can erase them from policy, from opportunity, and yes, from belonging. I'm Sandra Babu-Boateng, and before we dive in, I want to invite you to be a part of something bigger. Because here at Panagenius TV, we're not just building a channel. We're building a home for global Black stories that are told with truth, with intention, and with power. And if that speaks to you, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and consider joining our membership community where we go beyond the headlines with exclusive content and behind-the-scenes conversation. And hey, follow me on all socials at Sandra Babu-Boateng, and let's stay connected. All right, now, let's get into it. So let's rewind the clock. It's September 4th, 1781. Long before there was a Hollywood sign, long before the Lakers, the Grammys, or Compton Versus hit the airwaves, there was El Pueblo de la Reina de Los Angeles. That was the original name. The town of the Queen of Angels. And the people who founded it, they weren't conquistadores. They weren't white settlers. They were a group of 44 colonists sent north by the Spanish crown to settle what we now call Los Angeles. They were called Los Pobladores, the settlers. And here's what most people don't know. 26 of those 44 settlers, more than half, were of African descent. That's right. The city that brands itself as the future was actually built by people America has tried to forget. Afro-Mexicans. According to the 1781 census, 2 were identified as Black, Negro, 8 as mulatto, mixed African and Spanish ancestry, 9 as indigenous, 1 as mestizo, mixed indigenous and Spanish ancestry, 1 as criollo, Spanish-born in the Americas, 1 as peninsula, Spanish-born in Spain. Names like Luis Quintero and Antonio Mesa stand out. Quintero, a Black trader from Guadalajara, and Mesa, a Black settler from Sinaloa, were among the founders. They, along with their families, laid the groundwork for what would become Los Angeles. Now, these settlers, they built homes, they cultivated the land, and established the infrastructure of the new pueblo. Their contributions were foundational, yet their stories have been largely erased from mainstream narratives. They weren't enslaved people. These were free Black and mixed-race citizens from Spanish Mexico, descendants of Africans who had lived for generations in places like Sinaloa, Durango, and Sonora. They were classified under Spain's caste system with names like mulatto, zambo, and mestizo, a rigid racial hierarchy that still couldn't stop them from making history. Spain needed settlers to hold its territory in Alta California, what's now the western U.S. So they didn't go looking for European aristocrats. They recruited hard-working, mixed-race families, farmers, laborers, artisans, people willing to build from the ground up. And they did. The original pobladores built homes. They raised crops. They dug irrigation ditches. They laid out the town's grid. They brought culture, language, and resilience to one of the most remote outposts of the Spanish Empire. Los Angeles started with black and brown hands on stolen indigenous land. Now that's the truth. But ask most people today who founded LA, they'll say Spain. They'll say Hollywood. They might say nothing at all. But now you know. Now you might be wondering, why would Spain choose Afro-Mexicans, people of African descent, to establish a new colony in Alta California? Here's the truth. It was about strategy. By the late 1700s, the Spanish Empire was racing to secure its hold on the northern frontier of New Spain. Russian and British forces were creeping down the Pacific coast. So Spain needed to move fast, and they needed settlers. But elite Spanish families weren't exactly lining up to risk their lives on the wild frontier. So Spain turned to the working class. Mixed-race families, many of them Afro-Mexican, who had the grit, the skills, and the willingness to build something from new. These weren't aristocrats. They were ranchers, tailors, masons, farmers, soldiers, people who could work the land, protect the settlement, and build community. And they brought more than labor. They brought culture, food, music, language, religion. They brought resilience, generations of survival in a rigid caste system that labeled them as mulatto, mestizo, or zambo. They brought knowledge of livestock, farming, trade, and infrastructure. In fact, the decision to include Afro-Mexicans wasn't accidental. It was imperial policy. Spanish colonial law allowed for casta settlers to be recruited if they were free and Catholic. In many cases, their mixed heritage made them more adaptable to indigenous environments, languages, and climates. So the Afro-Mexican pobladores weren't just fillers in a colonial project. They were essential to the survival and success of the early Pueblo. But over time, as Anglo-American influence took over California, that legacy was buried. The founders were whitewashed. The black and brown faces that built Los Angeles were erased from the narrative. So what happened? Their legacy was erased, intentionally. It started in 1848 when the U.S. took control of California after the Mexican-American War. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo promised to respect the rights of Mexican citizens. But what actually happened? Anglo-American settlers flooded in, and with them came white supremacy. New laws, new schools, and new maps rewrote the story of California's founding. Suddenly, it wasn't Afro-Mexican settlers who built LA. It was pioneers, white ones. And the caste system that once labeled people mulatto or mestizo, it was replaced by the blunt force of American one-drop racial logic. If you had black ancestry, you were just black. And if you were black, you were pushed out of history. In fact, some of the original pobladores' descendants began reclassifying themselves as Spanish or white, just to survive and access rights under the new American regime. Over time, the Black and brown contributions to LA's founding were scrubbed from textbooks, city monuments, and public memory. For decades, even major civic celebrations of LA's birthday focused only on Spanish or European heritage, ignoring the mixed-race families that made it possible. Now, in the early 20th century, a plaque was installed near Olvera Street to commemorate the city's founders. However, this marker made no mention of the African heritage of many of its members. Enter Miriam Matthews, Los Angeles' first African-American librarian, appointed in 1927. Now, Matthews was a scholar, historian, and advocate who dedicated her life to unearthing and preserving Black history in California. She discovered that over half of Los Angeles' original settlers were of African descent. In the late 1970s, Matthews joined the city's Bicentennial Committee. She championed the creation of a new, accurate monument that would honor the true diversity of Los Angeles' founders. Her efforts culminated in the installation of a new plaque in 1981 at El Pueblo de Los Angeles Historical Monument. This plaque listed each of the 44 settlers by name, age, gender, and yes, racial heritage, acknowledging the multiracial origins of the city. But the story doesn't end there, my people. In recent years, this very plaque was stolen, likely by scrap metal thieves, but who knows? The theft of this monument is more than just a loss of metal. It's a symbolic erasure of the city's true history and the contributions of its Black and brown founders. Yet the legacy of Miriam Matthews endures. Her relentless dedication ensured that the stories of Los Angeles' Afro-Mexican pioneers were not forgotten. It wasn't until the 1980s, after years of community pressure, that the city officially recognized the African and indigenous heritage of the original settlers in its public commemorations. And even now, most Angelenos have no idea that LA was founded by people of African descent. But this wasn't just oversight. It was erasure with intention. Because if you acknowledge that Black and brown people built this city, you have to start rethinking everything else. So yeah, it matters that Los Angeles was founded by Afro-Mexicans. But this isn't just some deep historical trivia. This is about now. Because what happened to the Black founders of LA, the way their names were stripped from plaques, their stories erased from textbooks, their legacy replaced with whitewashed myths, that same playbook is being run right now by the Trump administration. Let's be real. In 2025, Trump isn't just waging a war on woke. He's waging a full-blown assault on Black memory. His executive orders have shut down DEI programs across the federal government. Civil rights offices closed. Affirmative action gone. And here's the kicker. They're literally deleting Black history from government websites. All gone. Profiles of Harriet Tubman, the Tuskegee Airmen, Jackie Robinson, wiped from public view like they never existed. Trump calls it restoring American pride. But we know what it really is. Erasure with intention. At the Smithsonian, Black museum directors are being fired. Exhibits on slavery, mass incarceration, even the civil rights movement are being, quote, reviewed for being, quote, too divisive. And don't get it twisted. This is bigger than policy. This is about power. Because if you erase Black people from history, again, you can erase them from policy, from opportunity, and from belonging. So when we talk about LA's Black founders, we're not just digging up the past. We're confronting the present. Because if we don't fight for our history, they'll bury it again. So here's what I want to leave you with, my people. What truths have been paved over in your city? whose stories get erased so someone else could feel more comfortable. And now that you know the truth about Los Angeles, what are you going to do with it? Because history isn't neutral. It's a battlefield. And if we don't tell our own stories, my people, they will. That's it for today's Breakdown, family. If this hits you, share it. If it taught you something new, drop a comment. And if you know someone who still thinks LA was built by Spanish missionaries and Hollywood studios, send them this. I'm Sandra Babu-Boateng. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care. Hey you! Thanks so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and join the family. Also, visit face2faceafrica.com for your daily news and updates on what's going on within the global Black community so you can stay informed.